Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here. Russell T Davies and David Tennant left a gaping chasm when they departed the Doctor Who franchise. Now, it's staggering really when you think about it, because how do you replace those entities? And this is why the BBC considered cancelling the whole show without Russell. So what happens is they go up to Russell T Davies and they say, right, Russell, you're leaving. I think we should just finish the show up, give it a good ending, because we just don't see how this continues without you. You've got a structure, you've got a franchise, you're going to go, you're taking that with you. We just don't see how this works. So Russell T Davies loves Doctor Who. He doesn't want it to end. So he goes up to Stephen. He goes, oi, Stephen, oi, Moffat. Yeah, you've done Blink. You've done The Girl in the Fireplace, right? You've done the gas mask episodes. You're awesome. You're awesome, right? I want you to take over Doctor Who. The BBC have just told me how amazing they think you are. Basically, they think the shit don't stink. So come on, Stephen. You're the new showrunner. And plus, if you don't, they'll cancel the show. Well, I'll do it then. I'll do it then. I'll do it then, If you believe in me so much, Russell, and the BBC do, I'll do it then. And so what's wrong with this picture then? Well, what's wrong with this picture is that Russell T Davies created a massive IP. Now, Doctor Who was very famous before, but it was never a massive IP. Russell T Davies created a global, successful IP that was challenging Star Wars and Star Trek for sci-fi popularity. Russell T Davies did that. So what's wrong with this picture, right? So the BBC don't have a structure in place. It should have been the head of BBC Drama who should have been recruiting the next showrunner. But instead they go, do you know what, Russell, we're going to cancel this show. You better find someone if you want it to continue. Totally wrong. What they should have done is said, look, Russell, you want to leave. You don't want the day-to-day kind of thing of running this show. We'd like you to remain in a godfather role where you plot out and continue this franchise. You create spin-offs, and then you can, then we can bring on another showrunner. So even when a showrunner leaves, the consistency is that you're still here. And I've said it before, it'd be very similar to what the MCU have got with Kevin Feige, and it would work. And plus, Russell wouldn't have to be there day to day. It would literally be a three-quarter job rather than a 100% job. So everybody's happy. You've got the genius that is Russell T Davies being a godfather, planning all this out, while you've got a showrunner beneath him. But what happens is you lose one of the most popular, successful doctors ever and one of the most successful Doctor Who showrunners. No, the most successful, the most clever, the one who made Doctor Who into this very, very healthy IP with so much potential. So what happens then? You give it to a really good storyteller, but who couldn't run a piss up in a brewery. Sorry, Stephen, I love you, but that's the situation. I mean, I speak to Stephen and Russell all the time on Instagram. They're great guys. They're very respectful. I never talk about the current show. I just heap praise on them because that's how I feel about them. And I don't see the need to be negative to these people. They've done so much for Doctor Who and for myself as a creative that I would never go on there and tell them what I don't like about what they did. I just think for me, it's just silly. I talk to them a lot on Instagram and my respect for them. But so Stephen, a really great guy, a really good storyteller, but he wasn't a showrunner. But you're going to say, hang on a minute, Mick, Sherlock. Yes, Sherlock was a show that him and Mark Gatiss worked on together. That's the difference. Mark's actually blocked me on Twitter years ago for sending him all Doctor Who auditions constantly, I know. I regret that, but hey, it's not meant to be. Me and Mark Gatiss just weren't meant to be. Still love him, no, think he's a multi-talented guy. But he's had Mark Gatiss to say, do you know what, Stephen, back off a bit here. No, don't do that. And you need, in a good partnership, it's like when you're married to someone and you're a bit of an a-hole, you lay in, but your wife kicks you out of bed and says, come on, put your collars down, do your hair, have a shave, you slob. She keeps you honest, right? And it's the same with Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat. Well, Stephen Moffat was totally running Doctor Who on his own. And sometimes it just didn't work out. So Russell T Davies and David Tennant leave this big gaping chasm, right? And what happens is Stephen Moffat comes in. Now, instead of then thinking, right, I implement my own ideas, but I pretty much keep things the way they are to a point. Because if it isn't broke, you don't fix it. So Russell T Davies' structure was perfect. All Stephen had to do is maybe give the show a darker vision like he wanted, because he does like doing dark and interesting and fairy tale type stories, which is brilliant. So you could have kept the structure. For example, changing the TARDIS was needless. He changed the TARDIS after RTD left. And for me, I'm thinking, it looks okay, but I prefer, for me, people say, well, Doctor Who's ever changed a universe? This is always the excuse, isn't it? But also, in modern day television and film IPs, you need a consistency. You need a familiarity. So what you quickly saw, the ratings were dropping slowly and slowly till we got to the season 10 and Peter Capaldi's final season, because it just isn't what people wanted from it. And this is the problem. This is not Stephen Moffat's fault, by the way. This is the BBC's fault for not implementing a structure. So if Russell T Davies doesn't want to continue in a Godfather, I says, look, guys, I'm done with Doctor Who. I'm not interested. I don't want to work with you guys. I don't like you. I don't trust you in terms of Doctor Who. So we're going to part company. If you want me to do other stuff for you, which he's done, obviously, I'll do that. So then you find somebody else who can run the show. Don't forget, not only did Russell leave, but Julie Gardner and Phil Collinson also left. You could have had those guys remain. Those guys should have remained. Why did they have to go as well? Why did they have to follow Russell? They didn't. I mean, I don't even think they still work with Russell when he does projects. So it was a bit weird to me why Phil Collinson couldn't have stayed. Why couldn't Phil Collinson and Julie Gardner have been this kind of godfather and godmother pulling the strings at the very top while Stephen was running the show? That would have been excellent. But instead, you leave a man whose strength isn't production, it's more writing. And every time he brings a producer, he loses them. No one was sticking with him. But with Julie Gardner, Russell T Davies and Phil Collinson, it was a team and it lasted for 5 years. And there was consistency there. So you look at the situation with Christopher Eccleston, the falling out there. That was dealt with so cleanly and tidy. You didn't even notice there was an issue within that season. He goes, they bring Tennant in, he's perfect, and the show gets stronger and stronger because Russell T Davies is that clever. So the fans don't need to know there was problems behind the scenes. I don't need to know. All I need is, I know when people are filming, it's a mess behind the scenes, but I don't care about that. I care about what I see. So this was the big mistake from the very beginning. So you lose David Tennant, you lose Russell T Davies, you're in trouble, but you lose the other producers as well. So then you bring someone in whose strengths aren't production but storytelling, and it goes awry very, very quickly. So season 5 is quite strong. Season 6 is okay. Season 7 is very mediocre, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse as it progresses, because the man isn't a producer. He's a writer, and this is the problem. Now, Russell T Davies' strengths are he's a great storyteller, but he's very good at building blocks, and he's a very good producer as well. And he showed that for 5 years with Doctor Who. So so the moral of this story is, so for me, Russell T Davies is Richard Donner, and David Tennant is Christopher Reeve. So you lose those elements, you don't have Superman anymore. So according to Stephen Moffat, he did ask David Tennant to stay. David thought about it, then decided to go. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's a bit like Chris Chibnall apparently asking Peter Capaldi to stay, which I don't believe, by the way. So, but even if David did stay, it would be under the premise of Stephen Moffat and not Russell T Davies. So he still would have dramatically changed his Doctor. And I think David could see, well, I've got an iconic status here with the fans. If I stay with this guy, that could be ruined. So I think David was right to leave. So if David stayed, it still wouldn't have been the magic that we remember. It's like Superman 3, no Richard Donner, but Christopher Reeve. It's an okay film, but it isn't as good as the first movie. Superman 2 is a really good movie, but it would have been a lot better. And we already know that Richard Donner was planning on 4 and 5 because Richard Donner and Mankiewicz were a great team. Dick was a great director, and Mank was a great writer. So that was a great team, and we would have had some awesome Superman movies. And It's like Russell T Davies and David Tennant. If they stayed on for another 3 or 4 years, imagine that. But even if he brought, let's just say he brought Morrissey in. Is it David? Yeah, David Morrissey was the guy he fancied as the next Doctor, and we know that's true because of the Christmas episode, The Next Doctor. But I know that for a fact. That's who he wanted as his next Doctor. Would have been amazing. Another great choice. Because it's all about Russell. It's more about Russell than it is about David Tennant. David Tennant was a great Doctor, but, you know, Russell's a genius. He was the puppet master. So once you lose that entity, that great thinking and that mentality, and you bring other people in, and you say, right, it's your turn now, do what you want. But that's a very dangerous game to play when you've got such a valuable IP, and we've seen it, and now all of that is a domino effect to season 11 and the 13th Doctor. So the BBC decide they want a female Doctor, but instead of actually bringing in someone who can make the show even better than it has been before, they just bring any old female in, you know. And this is the problem. And then you bring in a showrunner who really doesn't have the love and imagination and passion for a sci-fi series, and he grounds it. And he makes it very mechanical, and he dumbs it down. And then you've got a big problem because, and then the camp split, because then you've got the kind of toxicity because, oh, you don't like it because she's a woman. No, I didn't want a female Doctor, but she wasn't the best choice. She got chosen because she knows the showrunner. And she can keep on telling us that she worked harder than anyone else to get this role, but I just don't believe you, Jodie, and I'm sorry. If I'm wrong about that, I don't want to disrespect you. You seem like a really nice lady. But I think when you bring someone in and you're getting her to go out in public to talk about white men, blah, 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 you're triggering people because there's no need. There's no need to trigger people or hate on people because of the colour of their skin. It doesn't matter if you're talking about black people, Asian people, or white people. You know, once you go down that route, it's just not good business. It's not good business. So you're in a situation now where Doctor Who is a public relations disaster. Now, and we've seen the consequences of this. Forget about the ratings. I always told you that. Always concentrating on the merchandise and the box sets. The season 11 box sets are not going to sell big. The merchandising, they can't sell the 13th Doctor doll. They're giving it away, and that's obvious. So this is where we've got to, because Russell T Davies was a clever man, and he knew how to do it. And then you've got Doctor Who Confidential. I told Russell this on Instagram the other day, that his enthusiasm on Doctor Who Confidential was amazing, amazing. And it made me fall in love with him and the show even more, because he's there and he's oozing love for this character. He's talking about when we were young, we all fantasized about the Cybermen and the Daleks fighting. We all did. And he did it, and it was amazing. And you've got them putting each other down and everything. So, and then, you know, in the middle of the Moffat era, you lose Doctor Who Confidential. You get the impression that Moffat wasn't particularly interested in kind of, you know, splitting his time from what he's doing. Where Russell was very good. He sat there and you could see him in his office talking about the episode. Do you remember that episode when we see David Tennant, you know, climbing on Pompeii and walking? A great little documentary episode of Doctor Who Confidential. When that goes, I know we're beginning. This is the end. This is the genuine love that we had under the RTD era. It's not the same anymore. And this is what happens. And it's not because Stephen Moffat isn't a Doctor Who fan or a good guy. It's just a different mentality, because Russell T Davies was all things to all people. He knew how to write Doctor Who. He knew how to develop it. He knew how to produce it. He knew how to market it. He gave us great spin-offs. He gave us Captain Jack. He gave us Torchwood. He gave Sarah Jane, the most iconic companion, her own show. And it was on a children's channel, and we all watched it. It wasn't just kids watching it. It was us lot as well. It was amazing. The guy is so clever, and that's what we've lost. And if you don't replace that cleverness and that passion and that ingenuity, this is what happens to Doctor Who. Doctor Who Season 11, this is where you go when you don't have a plan B. You don't have a structure. And Doctor Who, because of Russell T Davies, became so mainstream, so successful. And instead of the BBC thinking, let's make the most out of this, let's bring in another guy, or let's respect this guy, Russell T Davies, and tell him we need him at least as a godfather to structure what goes on. And below him can be a showrunner. This is what I said on the top of the show. Do that, and you've got a brilliant thing. But no structure, no plan, and this is where Doctor Who is today. And right now, the future of Doctor Who is season 12. Past that, I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. We're all worried because we love Doctor Who. We don't want to see it go away. But our hands are tied. We have to wait and see what happens. But I think most people right now are not really looking forward to season 12 and know that we're in a situation. It's a sad situation. It's a situation where no franchise or IP should be in. But we are where we are because the BBC never kind of saw the success and said, right, let's not let this go. Let's not be complacent here. But complacency actually killed Doctor Who.